Hello, everybody. Hopefully everything is running smooth here. Just want to make sure that audio is okay, and then we'll get started. Let's wait for it to catch up. There's a little bit of a lag, definitely, between what where I am and where you like how long it takes to get to YouTube. So we'll wait for that to happen. There we go. I'm hearing it. I'm not seeing. Hold on. Not seeing my video coming through. So let me just make sure that it's coming through. Ah, that's fun. The there we go. Okay, I think okay. All right, now everything's good. All right, it was a problem on my end, so y'all probably didn't see anything wrong. So anyway, hello everybody. We're getting started on talking about a couple of different interesting interesting news stories from this past week. And probably before this past week. But um So, quick GameStop related update. Still holding, still holding on to that. A lot of crazy things happened, and you'll probably saw some posts on my Tumblr from that. As far as essentially, I mean, it's the corruption. It's the corruption you expect from Wall Street and SEC and government and anything of that nature. So it's not like, I mean, we should have seen it coming, but basically the SEC and hedge funds screwed over a lot of people, and there's no real way to fix that or actually really hold anybody accountable. Let me just that right there. I like that better. That's better. There's no real way to hold anybody accountable. The SEC is not going to actually do anything useful. If anything, they're going to go after people on Reddit, and there might be congressional hearings with people from Reddit, including the guy who kind of quote unquote started the whole thing. He didn't really, I mean, it wasn't what he was trying to do. He was really just trying to say, hey, here's my play, whatever. But because he put so much in and he made so much early on, people saw him as kind of the leader and as like, if he's still holding, I'm still holding kind of thing. And now they want him to come testify and say if he manipulated the market, which, whatever. So that's fun. But what we're really going to get into today is just the avalanche of concerning media stories. So, couple of things. So, I almost don't know what order to go through these in. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully not have that echo that I've had in the past, which has been a problem. So let me see if I can make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah, I think I want to do it this order. So let's see. Sorry, y'all. I just need to make sure that I'm not going to get that double audio effect. There we go. So we're going to start, and I kind of went in reverse order here as far as the order of stories here. We're going to actually start with MSNBC. So this is from the Patriots Gazette, and I don't know anything about them as a publication. The only reason I link to them is because they have both the clip from MSNBC and the transcript, and there might be a better source that has both. If there is, feel free to let me know. But just when I was trying to find a good source that had the clip itself and the transcript, this is what I came up with initially. So, MSNBC's Nicole Wallace brings up drone strikes as a solution to domestic terrorism. Now, I'm not going to play the clip because sometimes there's copyright things if I play like too much of a clip from MSNBC or somebody like that. I haven't actually encountered this problem, but I know other YouTubers have. I'm just going to adjust my camera here because that looks better. All right. But so there's the clip here, and I linked this in the description. So if you want to watch the clip and hear her say it in her own voice, and Nicole Wallace, if you're not familiar with MSNBC, I know I'm not. I was kind of introduced to this clip. I don't watch MSNBC ever. I only ever see clips of it, so I don't know who these people are. But Nicole Wallace is this lady here on the left. And there's a couple other interesting clips of her saying, or her interviewing people, or her, segments with her in them, with similar themes. And we're going to get into this here. So she's doing a news story, right? So this is a, and this, I'm assuming, I'm going to just assume that this panel of people here, that this is some kind of opinion panel, right? I'm not going to assume this is meant to be straight news. I'm assuming this is commentary. I don't know how much you can tell the difference on MSNBC or really any other cable news channel at this point. I don't know if there is a difference. I don't know if there's a way at this point in time to really do straight news. Or if you're doing that, that you're not necessarily getting a whole lot of views and clicks. If you're not giving your opinion, if you're literally just saying this happened. Like, so the straight news version of this is this first part. There's a bulletin released to all law enforcement earlier this week that there is until the end of April, a persistent threat of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism carried out in the ideology and around this belief that the election was fraudulent and that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. Now, that alone, that could be a news story if that's really what the bulletin says. Now, I don't have the full text of the bulletin that she's referencing. That's not really the point of what we're talking about here. But depending on what she's like, so depending on what the bulletin actually says, that right there could be a news story. And that would be the end of the news story. Now, where you get into commentary and editorializing is where she goes next. And the thing is, again, I don't know, maybe there's a different segment on MSNBC, a different time where they would have just said this. There's a bulletin that was sent out to law enforcement, but because she doesn't say who sent it out. She didn't say, like, it says all law enforcement. Is that all police departments? Is that who's sending this out? Where is this? So from a news perspective, this isn't very good. But if she's just trying to do commentary, okay, fine. So, but if she's just doing commentary, if she's editorializing, then what comes next is all the more concerning, because this is her on this platform, MSNBC. She seems to be a major, I don't know who she is again. I don't know what her role is, how prominent she is, but because of some of the things that I've seen, clips I've seen with her, it sounds like she's regular. She's a regular host or whatever. She goes on to say, all of those ideologies. So the ideology around this belief that the election was fraudulent and that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. Those are two huge things right there. The election was fraudulent. So if you believe that there was fraud, if you believe that there were irregularities that changed the outcome of the election, and if you believe that the COVID restrictions were unnecessary, that there basically she was saying, and now to be entirely fair to her, because a lot of people are saying, oh, she just wants anybody who believes these things is a domestic terrorist. She doesn't exactly say that. And again, I would love to read the original text of this bulletin that she's referencing, but essentially it sounds like it's some kind of bulletin, some kind of advisory going out to law enforcement saying that there is domestic terrorism surrounding these ideas. Now, this is where it gets scary, because she and other media are talking to people from CIA, FBI, other former CIA, former FBI people who have had experience in dealing with both domestic and foreign terrorism. And they talk about the ideology, or the ideas behind it being the root, and that you have to get to the root. And so that it's not enough simply to go after those who actually commit violence, or who actually destroy property, or commit terrorism. That's not sufficient. You have to go to the root. And so that's where this becomes concerning. So she herself does not say, oh, everybody who believes this or says this is a domestic terrorist. She says these ideologies have this extremism, terrorism surrounding them. And then how do you deal with that terrorism, that extremism? You have to go to the root of the ideology, which then goes back to anybody who believes this. But she says all of these ideologies are pushed by Donald Trump. But my question for you is around incitement, she says. We had a policy, and it was very controversial. It was carried out under the Bush years and under the Obama years. So she points out, she says it's controversial, but then she points out, she said this was Republican and Democrat. And I think that's very interesting. Now, you can argue about how truly Republican Bush was and whatever, but I find it interesting that she references that this was under both Bush and Obama. So she's trying to appeal to a wide base here, a wide base of Americans who maybe liked both Bush and Obama, people who are more centrist, who are more moderate, and who, were okay with Bush, who were okay with Obama. They were, maybe they weren't huge fans of either, or maybe they loved both of them. I don't know. But, the people who see Bush and Obama as civil presidents, as rational, reasonable presidents, as opposed to Trump, that's what she's appealing to here. And so there's this policy of attacking terrorism at its root, of going after and killing, in the case of Anwar al-Awlaki, an American, a Yemeni American, with a drone strike for the crime of inciting violence, inciting terrorism. Whew. So again, back up here, she's talking about domestic extremism and domestic terrorism centered around the belief that the election was fraudulent and the COVID restrictions were unnecessary. And she cites a policy, points out that it was under both Bush and Obama. And here we have Biden, who's supposed to be Obama 2.0 or whatever, a return to the Obama years is how people have phrased it, of attacking terrorism at its root, going after and killing, for inciting terrorism. And she references specifically the killing of an American citizen who is accused of inciting terrorism. And she admits it was controversial, but she kind of then just goes on as though, well, we've done this before. And then she says, Mitch McConnell was in the Senate then. He was in the Senate after 9/11. How does Mitch McConnell, who understands that the way you root out terrorism is to take on, in the case of Islamic terrorism, kill those who incite it? So up here, she calls it controversial. Up here, she calls it controversial. But then down here, she's saying this is the way you deal with it. So she admits that it's controversial, but then basically brushes that aside and says, no, this is how you deal with terrorism. This is how you deal with domestic terrorism or foreign terrorism or Islamic terrorism. And killing those who incite it. And then she says, how does he not vote to convict someone that he said on the floor of the Senate incited an insurrection? So she's referring to Trump. She's referring to impeachment. She's saying, why wouldn't Mitch McConnell vote, because it's this thing about whether or not he will vote to convict Trump for inciting insurrection. And she's essentially saying, and you could take what she's saying and make, I think, a very different point of, maybe we should rethink our policies in the Middle East. Maybe the way that we've dealt with terrorism has not been the best. And that the way some of our policies have created terrorism, we can go into that. But she's essentially saying, if our policy is to go after, root out, and kill those who incite with ideas, because she's talking about ideology here. She's talking about ideology and inciting. She's not talking about committing violence, committing terrorism. She's talking about inciting it. About the ideology, again, going back up here, ideology and belief that incites extremism and terrorism. So she's not here, and I don't want to be unfair to her. And I know some people are going to kind of exaggerate this a little bit. She is not suggesting outright. She's not verbally saying we should drone strike people who disagree with the results of the election or who disagree with COVID restrictions. She's suggesting that we should apply the same strategy or some of the same strategies to those who she would consider to be domestic terrorists or domestic extremists based on those ideologies that we apply to Islamic terrorism overseas. And so you can watch the clip. And then I want to go to one other thing from her. And again, this is through Newsbusters. And again, MRC, you don't have to love them. But they do have, again, the clip and the transcript. And that makes a news source credible if they have the clip and they have the transcript. They can have whatever commentary they want, but that's what I'm looking for. They're not saying that somebody said this without providing the evidence. Like, they're providing the evidence, they're providing her own words. They're saying this is what she said, or this is what her guest said. So this is another panel. It looks like a different panel, different group of people. But again, Nicole Wallace right here. And here's the transcript. So she's interviewing Clint Watts, who is a former FBI agent. He is listed as a national security contributor for NBC News and MSNBC. So he comes on, he gives his take on national security, on FBI investigations, law enforcement, whatever, national security contributor. That's what he comes and gives his expertise on. So she has him on, and she, first of all, she starts off, I wouldn't waste my breath with them, and she's referring to Republicans. And I'd say to Democrats, it's time to roll out a terrorism-era choice for Republicans. This should come from every Democrat. You're either with them or with us. There are not two sides to be taken on the question of incitement. Okay, so that's very divisive. That is very polarizing rhetoric right there. And she says, how do you deal with a domestic terror threat without dealing with those inciting and spreading it? And Clint Watts says, Nicole, you can't. You'll always be on your heels, you'll always be reactive. We had a period after 9/11 where we were trying to get left of boom. So in counterterrorism, they call this left of boom, which is where you get way up the stream of an attack and start to root out all of the confluences which bring about the attack. So it's this idea that it's not just about whatever, let's say some kind of violent act happens. You're not just going after the person who committed the violent act. You're saying what inspired them, what radicalized them, what led them to believe that this was necessary for them to do. And you're going after that person or group or idea. And this is where it gets scary, because they're suggesting that if somebody goes out and commits a violent act because of the election, so in the case of the Capitol riots, those who actually broke into the Capitol, not just those who wandered through, but those who actually broke in, those who actually hurt people, those who actually did some harm. Or, let's say somebody goes and does something crazy because of COVID or because of lockdowns. The idea would be that those who are spreading the narrative, of COVID lockdowns are bad, the election was stolen, somebody who's saying those things is inspiring and inciting and spreading the ideology that caused the terror. And he says, if you took what President Trump said, now, of course, what did President Trump say? If we actually go watch what President Trump said during his speech about protesting, he said, peacefully march, peacefully protest. Make your voices heard peacefully, right? He doesn't say go storm the Capitol. Doesn't say that. But anyway, so you take what President Trump said and you put it in Anwar Awalki's mouth, we would be talking about a drone strike overseas. So that's one aspect of our political political leaders talking about this rhetoric. So this goes a little bit further, right? He basically said if this scenario, if you have what Trump said, and again, he doesn't specify exactly what thing that Trump said that he thinks was so terrible, but he said what Trump said. So whatever it is that we think Trump said that was so bad, if somebody in the Middle East who had said it, even an American citizen, because remember Anwar al-Awlaki was an American citizen who happens to be from, whose national or whose ethnic origin is from the Middle East, because Anwar al-Awlaki was U.S. born, but somebody's over in the Middle East, and they're saying the things that Trump said, whatever they think that is. They're saying you deal with that like domestic terrorism. Okay, so I spent some time on those too, because again, it's this idea. If we go back here, she says, Nicole Wallace says, the belief that the election was fraudulent and that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. All right, now we go here. Time magazine. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. This article is a roller coaster. It is a wild, wild ride. And if you have not read it yet, please actually read it. Not because the stuff that you may be hearing about it is untrue, but because it's probably worse than what you've heard. So I got to start from the very beginning on this. So this is Molly Ball. She writes this piece called "The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election." And she says a weird thing happened right after the November 3rd election. Nothing. The nation was braced for chaos. Remember, I talked about post-election chaos. I did a whole video on preparing for post-election chaos. I told y'all to stock up food and water. I told y'all to get ready. Nobody knew what was going to happen, but there was all this talk of protests and who knows what was going to happen. And she said, instead, an eerie quiet descended. Okay. Then she says, the second odd thing happened. Corporate America turned on him, and blah, blah, blah. And Trump says it was all, Trump said something felt amiss. It was all very, very strange. Within days after the election, we witnessed an orchestrated effort to anoint the winner, even while many key states were still being counted. In a way, she says, Trump was right. Now, to be fair, she does not say Trump was right about everything he ever said. She admits that there is something going on. Then she goes on, the next sentence, there was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes that curtailed the protests and coordinated resistance from CEOs. So again, if you read through this, she essentially says that there was a coordinated effort from unions, from corporations, from media, from people involved with, the Obama administration and other politically involved people. There was this active, coordinated effort and I got to go down to my favorite section here. Where is it? It's my favorite part. I think it's down way at the bottom. Hold on. I'm just gonna control F here. Looking for the word cabal. Okay, so this is my favorite part. She says that's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. A well-funded cabal. She uses the word cabal. Like, that's the kind of thing that you hear in a QAnon thread, or that's something you hear in a conspiracy theory video. you're deep down a rabbit hole on YouTube and you start hearing about cabals. This is a Time magazine article. The weirdest thing about this whole thing is she uses all this language about conspiracies, about shadow organizations, cabals, and then essentially says it's a good thing. So you're allowed to say all this stuff as long as you paint it as a good thing. So she says, this is quoting Time magazine, so don't ban me, YouTube. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election. Don't say they were rigging it. They were fortifying it. They believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy in America endures. So they want you to, so here's the thing, they want credit. She describes this shadow organization, this conspiracy. Essentially, they want credit. They want to say, hey, look, we made sure things turned out this way, and we want you to thank us for it. And we want you to understand that it was necessary so that you'll let us do it again. That's what they really want. They're setting up, they're essentially taking all of the vocabulary of somebody who would say this was a conspiracy, it was fraud, it was whatever. They avoid the word fraud and they say it wasn't rigging. But they use the words cabal, conspiracy, shadow organization. They use all these terms that you would associate with some kind of conspiracy theory video. And they specifically say all this stuff was necessary and good. They want you to say, yes, there was a conspiracy. Yes, there was a coordinated effort to control the media and control information. But it was necessary. We had to do it for democracy. And she names names. Like, there's names in here. People who coordinated this. And it just goes on and on and on. But the thing is, you go back, if you already felt that there was something amiss with the election, if you felt like there was a coordinated effort, where's the part where she talks about, yeah, they fended off voter suppression lawsuits, recruited armies of poll workers, and got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time. They fended off lawsuits. So they say voter suppression. Another way to say voter suppression in some cases would be election integrity. Things like voter ID, things like signature verification, to make sure that when you vote, you are who you say you are, which does a lot of things. Not only does it make sure that nobody's voting who shouldn't be, it also means that your vote is your vote. If you have voter ID and signature verification and other ways to make sure that you are who you say you are, you're ensuring that your vote is your vote. There were people who showed up on November 3rd to vote who were told that they had already voted, and they had not. Election integrity and signature, basically voter ID verification, whatever form that is, ensures that when you show up to vote, your vote is counted for you, for the person that you want to vote for, and that nobody can vote in your name. And that if you choose not to vote, this is important, even for those of y'all who maybe are like, well, voting is stupid and I don't vote. Even if you choose not to vote, you want to make sure that nobody is voting in your name, that your vote that you chose, you said, I don't want to vote, I don't want to put my vote behind any of these candidates. You want to make sure that nobody's using your vote against your will, against your wishes, right? So everybody should be concerned about election integrity, but they call it voter suppression. And so therefore it's a good thing. They fended off voter suppression lawsuits. We talk about the courts and how time after time after time, Trump's legal team and other lawyers, other people who've tried to bring forward complaints about the election process were turned away at the courts. This article is saying who was responsible for that. For the media, the courts, the corporations, all of it. What they've essentially said is yes, we conspired. Yes, we worked together. We had this shadow organization, this shadow network of whatever. And it was a good thing. So now, again, we go back to this idea. If you believe that the election was stolen or fraudulent, you might be a domestic terrorist. So they're not saying that if you believe there were irregularities or you believe something was wrong or you believe whatever. They're saying if you believe it was fraudulent. And they're being very clear about this. They're saying, yes, we conspired. Yes, we coordinated. Yes, we did these things to ensure. Oh, where's my other favorite phrase? They say every attempt to interfere with the proper outcome of the election was defeated. The proper outcome. They ensured the proper outcome. So it's not about whether you believe that there was a well-funded cabal working behind the scenes. It's about whether you believe that was a bad thing. It's not about the facts. It's about whether you believe they were right or wrong. That's what makes the difference between you being a Time magazine writer or a domestic terrorist. That's the distinction. And so, and there's one more thing that I want to just kind of, did I forget to get this particular, I forgot to put this link in the description. I will put it in there soon, but I forgot to include it, and it's in my title, so I should totally have included that in the stream, but that's okay, or in the description. So anyway, so we'll talk about it now. How the Biden administration can help solve a reality crisis. This is the New York Times. And we're just going to, scroll past their stuff where they make One American News sound like that they're propaganda or whatever. Blah, 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 blah. And so they basically say, what do we do to deal with this issue of this ideological terrorism kind of extremism thing? And we go down here and they say, this is their recommendation. This is this New York Times writer making a recommendation to the Biden administration. Appoint a reality czar. So now this is not something, again, I want to be clear, the Biden administration has not said that they're going to do this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. This is a New York Times writer who says they spoke to several experts. I don't know who these experts are, or actually they do have some. They do have a few different people that are named. But this is what they're recommending to the Biden administration. This is what the mainstream media is recommending. And if we learned anything from this Time magazine article, we know what the power of media recommendation is. Several experts I spoke with recommended that the Biden administration put together a cross-agency task force to tackle disinformation and domestic extremism, which would be led by something like a reality czar. They use the word czar. Be real clear about this. They're using the word czar. It sounds a little dystopian, he says, but let's hear them out. So again, we have well-funded cabal, we have conspiracy, we have all of this language here, and then we have him admitting, and over in this New York Times article, it sounds a little dystopian, but let's hear them out. So what they're trying to do is desensitize us. They're preparing us for a ramping up of this dystopian nightmare that we've been in since March of last year, or since probably before then, but at least March of last year. They're desensitizing us to words like cabal and conspiracy, czar, and dystopian. They're reframing these concepts as though that they are positive things or potentially neutral, at least things that are justified by the ends, that we can do things that are dystopian, we can do things that sound scary as long as we're doing them for the right reasons, for the right outcome. And they talk about essentially like you have the federal, they said if you have the CDC and the Federal Election Commission and they're both trying to tamp down or, clamp down on conspiracy theories, what if we just had one task force that was in charge of getting rid of all the disinformation so they could be coordinated and efficient? So I show you all this. I show you all these things. And you may have seen some of them before. The real question here is what happens next? I want to encourage you to take a step back because you may have seen all of these different articles, all of these different things at various times. Maybe some of them you've never heard of before. Maybe this is all news to you. But likely, if you're like me and you watch a lot of different news sources, especially a lot of different commentary. I watch a lot of commentary from a lot of different people. And so I'd heard these stories from various different sources. I want to take a step back and look at the big picture here and look at the forest instead of the trees. I showed you a whole bunch of trees. We are entering a new phase in America. And I kind of alluded to this before inauguration day. I had a video that said two possible roads forward, or something about two possible outcomes. Because we didn't know what was going to happen on inauguration day. Again, we going back to that Time magazine article. It's like, oh well, we expected there to be violence and all of that. And actually, if you go, I'm not going to share my screen again, but if you go to the Time magazine article, there's a point in somewhere in there where they actually ensured, like they actually called off activists and pulled back activists. So they essentially admitted that they can control the riots that we've had, the riots and the civil unrest that we've had. They essentially admit that they could control it the whole time, and that they essentially send the signal about when to go out and when not to. So they're admitting that they have this control, and they're essentially taking credit for the fact that election night itself and inauguration day went smoothly. But I had talked about in that video, because we didn't know what was going to happen, two possible outcomes. One was that something really, really crazy happened on inauguration day and we went into some kind of like crazy conflict. The other was that everything went smoothly and Biden becomes president and we go on a slow descent of decline. The censorship, the coordination, the blatant coordination between corporations, unions, and the government and the media. All of that combined, what that gives us is we have entered a new phase of American history. And it is a decline into a dystopia that we are, and we would look back and say, oh, we're already in a dystopia. We're locked down. We have this pandemic. We have these masks and social distancing and this propaganda and all this nonsense. Yes, we are in some senses in a dystopia, but it's, but people would say, okay, well, maybe we are, but I'm still living my life. A lot of people kept their jobs, people who could work from home or who were considered essential workers at the beginning, people who just continued on with their lives, and maybe now they have to wear a mask and they don't think it's that big of a deal, and whatever. part of it is the slippery slope or the boiling frog analogy, where we don't realize how bad it is until we're real deep into it. And again, if you think about going back to February of last year and explaining where we're at now to somebody. But I think we've shifted gears a little bit, and we're doing something a little bit different now. At this point, the Democratic Party essentially has control over all three branches of government. They have Congress, they have the White House. They have essentially promised to pack the courts before the election. When Amy Coney Barrett was approved or was confirmed, they said, if she's confirmed, we will pack the courts. I fully expect them to pack the courts, to create additional seats on the Supreme Court bench, to nominate additional justices, and also to nominate just to add additional uh, judges and stuff in other federal courts. So they're going to control all three branches of government. They control the media. And I don't know if they control the corporations or the corporations control them, but their corporations and the government are definitely hand in hand at this point. And I think that's very, very obvious. There is no way at this point that a true conservative Republican, certainly not libertarian candidate, wins any national level election ever again. You might have a couple of victories in, say, House in maybe we win some House seats back, maybe we win some Senate seats back, but you're never going to see the shift of. You're certainly not going to see a shift of power, the pendulum swinging back to the right or back to whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it right or left or whatever, however you want to phrase it. You're not going to see that pendulum swing anytime soon. They've grabbed the pendulum and they're holding it in place. You might see a couple of victories here and there. You might see some local election victories, people turning out for local elections. But as far as presidential, and as far as Senate and House seats in areas that are essentially swing or critical, strategically, you're not going to see those shift. The Democrat, we are entering a one-party system. Any Republicans that do win are going to be extremely establishment, weak Republicans who are easily controlled by the Democrats, who compromise and compromise and compromise and have no backbone, who will say nice words and then do nothing, which we already sort of had that, but it's going to get worse. We're going to get more Mitt Romneys, right? And Mitch McConnells. We're not going to get Rand Pauls, right? And Ted Cruz's. We're not going to get them going forward. Or Josh Hawley's. We're not going to get those people. They've stripped Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments, which means that her constituents are essentially without real representation in the House. If they had removed her from Congress, then her constituents would have been able to vote in somebody else, or they would have appointed somebody else, whatever the process is. She would have been replaced. But by removing her from her committee assignments, she has effectively no voice in the House of Representatives. And her constituents have effectively no voice in that body. That is what we're looking forward to. They are going to strip our representation from us. They are going to make it so that we can vote all we want, but we will not see real representation that matters. We will not really have a voice. They might make us think we do. And meanwhile, they're going to censor anybody who goes even just slightly slightly right of the left. The Overton window, which is that kind of here's what's acceptable to discuss in polite society, is going to shift left. It already has shifted left. It's going to shift further left. Moderates are already finding themselves being labeled as right-wing or alt-right. Progressives, who maybe were like Bernie Sanders kind of supporters, more populist left people, are already being censored and banned. They're going to keep a very, very narrow lane of what is acceptable. They're going to have a very, very narrow range of acceptable opinions, and they're going to allow debate, hot, contested debate within that narrow range so that you feel like there's still a debate happening. But they're going to make it so narrow that it really won't even matter. And if you're outside of that narrow range of debate, you're going to be called an extremist. And they're going to essentially institute the policies we've been using in the Middle East for however long now. And they're going to say that's how we have to deal with these extremists. We are not in a dystopian movie or dystopian novel, because a dystopian novel typically begins in the midst of the dystopia. It begins in the midst of the authoritarian government or whatever the scenario is. It actually usually begins late in that. Most dystopian movies and novels are set well into the dystopian, the dictatorship or the autocratic regime, such that the main characters have known no other life or have only heard stories of another world, another way of doing things. We are in the prequel. We are in the prologue. We are the beginning of the movie where they do the news flashbacks to show how did we get here. That's where we are. Washington, D.C. is occupied by National Guard. They are doing a stand down, I think a 60-day stand down of military forces to screen them for extremism. Extremism can include being part of a Turning Point USA club in college, having a Gadsden flag, wearing a Trump hat at some point. They are taking control of every aspect of government, media, corporations. They have shut down small businesses, and many small businesses are not going to reopen. They are now reopening small businesses, but floating talk of other strains that are more deadly and more contagious, such that in a couple of months, and I would not be surprised if it was mid-March or April, we may see shutdowns again, because they're going to say, oh, the African strain is here, the South African strain, the British strain, the whatever strain is here, and now we have to shut down again because it's worse than the old COVID. So they're going to shut down small businesses again, which is going to force small businesses that tried to reopen to close permanently. A lot of small businesses will not survive reopening, investing in reopening, investing in product and staff and all the COVID supplies. If they have to do outdoor dining, all the things that come with that, and then being shut down again, they will not survive. So what you do is you eliminate small business, or you eliminate any small business that is not part of the corporation. So they're going to kind of envelop these small businesses either through the infrastructure or through directly buying them out and making them look like they're still small businesses when they are really owned and controlled by the corporation. The corporations will be the only employers. You'll be working for a corporation or a subsidiary of a corporation. They'll be the only place for you to get food, supplies, anything that you need is going to come from the corporations. Such that the corporation will have as much power, if not more, than the federal government or any level of government. The problem there is corporations are not bound by the Constitution. The government is bound by the Constitution. Corporations are really not bound by a whole lot. So this concept of First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights, it's going to become obsolete because it won't be the government. The corporation will tell you, you must do this, you must not do that, you must not say this or that, or you will be fired, you will be cut off from society, You will not be able to pay your bills. You will not be able to buy food unless you toe the line. That is what we are looking at. We are not there yet. It's not like that right now. If you go outside, it's not like that right now. We are in the prologue. And the question is, what can you do? What can we do? What can I do? And I've talked before about the idea of becoming more self-sufficient, becoming more sustainable. Sadly, I am still not in a position where I could realistically grow all my own food. That there's a lot that goes into that. I'm trying to grow more of my own food. I'm trying to eat more things that I grew myself. Again, I'm not anywhere close to being able to do that consistently. Last night, two nights ago, I did get to make a meal where at least all of the produce in the meal had come from my garden, and that was really, really exciting. That is not the norm. It's not something I can do regularly. But I am, and I think everybody should be, really thinking carefully about where we get our products, where we shop, who we work for, who we coordinate with. And if you are able to do so, limiting what you buy from corporations, and again, not perfect at this, but whenever possible, shopping at local businesses, buying things from local producers, so buying food from farmers markets and from local farms, buying other items from local craftsmen and artisans when you can. Again, that's expensive, but it gives you back some power and it keeps money in your community and it keeps the money away from the corporation. It's not perfect, but it's something that we should really consider. And again, if you are in a position to do so, I highly recommend getting away from the cities, living as sustainably as possible, as off-grid as possible. We've already seen Los Angeles over last summer. City of Los Angeles shut off utilities to homes that had hosted parties during the COVID pandemic. So people who had parties, had friends over, whatever, their utilities were shut off. They can shut off your utilities if they decide they don't like you. So if you can be less dependent on the grid, less dependent on corporations and the supply chain, more sustainable, not 100%. I'm not asking anybody to be 100% self-sufficient. Nobody really can be. But the more sustainable, the more self-sufficient you are, the less these corporations and the government can control you. If you have children, do not put them in public school. And if they are in public school now, take them out. I am a public school teacher. There is no good reason at this point in time, especially with so many schools being closed down or being very restricted in their reopening. There are very, very few good reasons to have your children in a public school. The only reason I can see is if you have small children and you and your spouse both work, or both parents work, or you're a single parent and they have to be somewhere. But even then, I would seriously try to find another arrangement. The public schools are indoctrination centers. I, as a public school teacher, do my best to teach critical thinking and to prepare my students for a world where they may have to challenge ideas. But that is not how the system is set up. I am swimming upstream to do that. And most teachers are not. Most teachers are not teaching critical thinking. Some think they are, but they're not. The curriculum is not set up that way. The standards are not set up that way. And they do everything possible so that the path of least resistance is to simply teach the standards and teach the curriculum and teach the propaganda. And that is what the easiest thing is to do if you are a teacher in a public school. So I guarantee you, or I can almost guarantee you, 99% guarantee you, that if your child is in public school, they are being fed straight up propaganda, not being taught to critically think, not being given a real education. And if you're using public school as a babysitting service, then you need to be actively deprogramming and, taking control of your child's education, not expecting the school to do it for you. If you absolutely must use the public school system as a daycare, as a babysitter for your small children, you must be actively involved in their education. You must know exactly what it is that they are covering in class, and you must be advocating and being a squeaky wheel. Because there's nothing good coming out of this. And the more we have this idea of reality czars and, truth and reconciliation and all these kinds of things about misinformation, we're not going to be teaching children how to think critically or evaluate information. We're going to teach them to trust official sources. They're going to be indoctrinated. There's already been cases like in Vermont where they were trying to get children to tell on their parents if their parents had, if they'd gone on trips over the holiday break, and getting kids to snitch on their parents to essentially say, oh yeah, we have to quarantine because we went somewhere. We're seeing kids, teenagers, who have turned in their parents for being in DC on January 6th. They will teach your children to snitch on you. If you have opinions that are wrong think. They will do that. It's not if, it's when. So if you can get your kids out of public school, do it. The more you can disconnect from the corporations, from the infrastructure, from the media, do it. Because the only resistance at this point is if enough people, like, this is the thing about America, we're a huge country landmass wise, also population, but especially landmass. If more and more people move away from the city, begin to do things like homesteading and living more self-sustainably, or even if they don't homestead per se, but they use their skills within their communities, and they trade and do free market capitalism, trade and all of that within their community. So I'm not talking about some kind of commune, everybody share everything. I'm talking about you go and use your skills within your community for the benefit of your community, exchange goods and services and even currency within your community. Being able to build communities that are as separate from the corporations, from this kind of dystopia that we're going into, as possible. That is the resistance. That is the way that we push back. The more people who can be prepared for disasters, the more people who can be self-sufficient in the case when something goes wrong, the better. If everybody could have 30 days of food and water in their home, even a huge disaster would be, like, the damage would be mitigated if everybody was prepared to go a couple of weeks without a grocery store. And it would reduce panic, it would reduce chaos. Just the more that we can be self-sufficient, the less dependent we are on government, the easier it will be to push back when they try to push crazy stuff on us. They're trying to make us dependent. They're trying to make us censor ourselves. So that's the other thing, is you do need to keep speaking up. Honestly, I would say set up your social media on MeWe and Gab and all of that. Like, set up your alternative platforms, but don't leave Twitter. Or if you left Twitter, consider going back. Because Twitter is being taken as the voice of the people, and we need people on Twitter challenging that. Until you get banned. If you get banned, yeah, go to wherever else. But until you get banned, until they actually ban you, you have to be out there speaking up. Now, if you are worried about losing your job, use a pseudonym, right? I don't put my full name out there for a reason. Use a pseudonym. You can even just make sure you don't put your face on there. I put my face out here because I do these videos. But make sure that you are speaking up in whatever way that you can. Because if we go silent, they win. If we censor ourselves, if we, comply out of fear, they win. So the more we can be independent, be self-sufficient, the better. The more we can challenge them and keep them from just being able to walk all over us, the better. So that's my long-winded analysis of where we're headed. It's not pretty. It's not fun. It's not very optimistic. But I honestly think that this is the beginning of something that will be an entire chapter, entire unit in a future history class. Someday in the future, there will be an entire unit on this period of time. And they'll take a test on it. And the question is, how does it end? And who are the key figures? And how is it portrayed? But all of that, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the stream for today. Again, make sure you check out the links in the description. I will put that link to the Reality Czar article. I don't know why I forgot to put it in the first place. But the links to the other articles that I mentioned are in there. There will be no stream next week because I will be at a volunteer orientation for 40 Days for Life. Do make sure that you sign up for your local 40 Days for Life campaign if you have not done so already. Make sure you check that out and sign up. But I'll be at my 40 Days for Life volunteer orientation. If you live in the Austin area, sign up for 40 Days for Life and come to the orientation and you'll see me there, which would be really cool. So if you live in the Austin area, sign up for 40 Days for Life. If you go to the website, it'll take you to our local campaign website. We have like a local organization that runs our campaigns. You'll find it through there. And you might see me at the volunteer orientation next Saturday. But so I won't be streaming next Saturday. I will stream on the 19th. That's the 19th, right? Or the 20th, whatever it is. Yeah, I no stream on the 13th. Yes, stream on the 20th. No stream on the 27th because I will be out of town. But so there's we're gonna kind of stagger for a little bit. All right. Y'all have a great week. Stay safe. Stock up if you need to. Check out the links. We have freedom cells down in the description. Again, that's great for if you're trying to build those communities that are off-grid or at least trying to be more self-sufficient. And then I have all my various social media alternate links. I am still primarily on Tumblr and Twitter, but there's other links in case either of those get banned. And then, of course, my priority commissions, which commissions are open right now. So feel free to order something if you need. Probably too late for Valentine's Day gifts. I probably should have done a push for that. But general gifts, things like that, check that out. All right, y'all have a great week. Stay safe, and I will see you 2 weeks from now on the 20th.